What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you with my first live video. We had a couple technical difficulties. It wasn't trying to let me be great, but you guys, we got a couple things I want to chop up with you guys today. Um, some news, breaking news dropping with our Atlanta Falcons. So we got some things to talk about, some draft talk, and then we're gonna do a Q&A session as well. We're gonna wait for a couple of y'all to get in here. I know y'all trying to catch up to the video. Catch in, jump into this live video. All right, we got one in the chat. I see you can't. Give me a thumbs up and let me know if y'all can hear me. What's up, Devon? Y'all let me know if y'all can hear me. I see we got 7 in the chat. What up, Mike? Mad Mike in the building. All right, my sister in the building. What's up, Ebony? James, what's going on, y'all? What's good, Reggie? In the building. I got a thumbs up. There you go, Juju on that beat. We in this thing. All right, yeah. So we're gonna chop it up. We're gonna talk about some draft talk. We're gonna talk about some breaking news that just broke with our linebacker Dion Jones. He actually restructured his contract, giving us about $4 million is what I heard in cap space. So it sounds like Terry Fontenot and these guys got something up, up their sleeve. What's up, Daniel? Y'all coming on? Come on in. We got a lot to talk about. But Dion Jones, breaking news, Dion Jones just recently restructured his contract with our Atlanta Falcons, and it's going to save us about $4 million in cap space. So it looks like the Falcons is making moves. Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith is making moves. It looks like Dion Jones is one of those guys that's going to be around for at least the next 2 seasons. So that's good news. What's up, James? What's up to everybody in the chat? We're going to talk about the NFL draft as well. Should the Falcons go for talent or should the Falcons go for need? But you guys, drop your questions in the chat as well. Let me know what you guys think about this Dion Jones re-signing or his restructure. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that. I mean, I just think this just tells us that Dion Jones is going to be around for the next couple seasons. The next player I expect to see possibly will be a player like Grady Jarrett. What's up? What's up, Miss Maggie? This is the Queen of Atlanta Falcons Nation. Y'all definitely go over to AFN. We almost at 1,000. Y'all go ahead and hit that subscribe button there at AFN as well. And it's already started. James, man, we appreciate the $5 holler. We appreciate it. We appreciate the super chat. Draft all day, yeah. But with that being said, let's talk a little bit about this draft talk. Let's get into this draft talk. I want to talk about, should the Atlanta Falcons draft for talent or should we draft for need? Personally, you guys know at Atlanta Falcons Nation, we've been talking about this for a while, about moving, trading back and not going for that 4th pick, taking a quarterback. And personally, I think that the Falcons at this point, we've seen a couple days ago, the 49ers trading up to that 3rd spot, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch as the GM for the 49ers. They traded up to that 3rd spot. I do believe the first 3 picks coming off the board are possibly going to be quarterbacks. And I really think that the Atlanta Falcons, in this scenario, we should trade back. I think we should trade back. Mike with the $5 super chat, $5 holler. Yeah, but I do think that the Falcons should trade back in this scenario and get as many assets as possible. I talked about it numerous times as far as Matt Ryan still having a lot left in the tank. We've been talking about that. And I really think in this instance, unless you're going with a guy like Kyle Pitts, who I think is a generational type talent, I really think that even with him being on the board, maybe at 4, I think that the best move for our Atlanta Falcons in this scenario would be trading back. I'm not for going for Kyle Pitts at this point. I kind of been jostling back and forth with, should we go with a player like Kyle Pitts or should we trade back and get as many assets on the defensive side of the ball? Personally, I think we need to balance this thing out. The word of the day is going to be balance. Like we need as much balance as possible, and we need as much help as possible on the defensive side of the ball. So I definitely think in this scenario, we need to go ahead and trade back. Even if Kyle Pitts is on the board, I think at this point we have enough firepower on offense. And if we want to win a Super Bowl in the near future, while we still have Matt Ryan, Julio Jones going forward, the best idea would be to trade back in this instance, get as many assets as possible. And then I would go first off in the trenches. Like that's what we really need. Right now, I feel like our biggest need for our Atlanta Falcons right now is edge rushers. We need edge rushers. We need to draft another defensive tackle. And that's what I would do if I were the Atlanta Falcons. With that fourth pick, I think we should trade back. And then at that point, we should go with one of the edge rushers. Personally, I think Gregory Rousseau out of the University of Miami would be the guy that I would go with personally, because I believe that not only does Greg Rousseau have talent and have a high ceiling, but he also has the physical gifts of being like 6'6", 6'7", long arms, very strong, can pretty much move up and down the line. He's a guy that's versatile. And I think in the future, he is raw right now when it comes to talent, and he's not fully developed. But I believe that you could, with a guy like Dean Pease being here and with the defensive scheme that we're going to run, I think that his ceiling is high enough where he could be a player like an Alden Smith, Julius Peppers type. And to me, over the last couple of seasons or even the last decade, the Falcons really haven't had that guy in the trenches. Other than John Abraham, we really haven't had that guy that can dominate in the trenches. So personally, I think with our first round pick, we should trade back and get the best available pass rusher, whether we feel like that's Greg Rousseau, whether we feel like that's Jalen Phillips, who I heard has had some concussion issues, but he's another guy that I feel like he's more polished than a Greg Rousseau. He can come in and be one of those guys on the edge that could give us some pass rush. Also, another guy that's really blew everybody away at the combine is a guy like Micah Parsons. He's another guy on the defensive side of the ball that I think could be a playmaker for our Falcons. And I do think that he's another player that I possibly would look at, even if we trade back. I think Micah Parsons could still be on the board, maybe in the teens or even the early 20s in the first round. And maybe we can get a couple second round picks or third round picks for that first pick that we have at 4. But first, I want to jump back in the chat and just say what's up to you guys. Let's see. Alex, what's going on? Alex Edwards, what's going on? You say he said he disagree with the Greg Rousseau. Yeah, he is raw. I agree with you. He's really raw, but I would give him a chance. I think that he has the physical attributes. We always hear it all the time. You can't teach size. You can't teach that type of size. You can, teach skill and you can teach technique, but you can't teach that size that he has. Atlanta Falcons Nation in the building. Drew, what's up, man? I appreciate y'all tuning in. I see in the chat Quitty Pay, Daniel. Quitty Pay is a beast. I like Quitty Pay out of the University of Michigan, but I think that he's a guy that also needs to develop. He's a little bit raw when it comes to pass rush. I like Quitty Pay's motor. I think he's a guy that has great motor, and he's a guy that's a dog in the run game. A guy that does a great job of setting the edge, and I do think that he's a guy that the Falcons could possibly go with. But if I were going to, if we were to take a guy like Quitty Pay, he possibly would be like the second guy I would take. So personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that the Falcons should draft multiple guys in the trenches. I don't think that we should just go with one guy. I think that because we're struggling so much with pass rush the last couple seasons, personally, what I would do, and that's why I came up with the scenario, is should the Falcons draft based off of talent, or should the Falcons kind of go as far as need? Personally, I would go with need, and I feel like the Falcons need pass rushers. So I would go with multiple guys, maybe Greg Rousseau and Quitty Pay, or maybe Greg Rousseau and Jalen Phillips. Another guy that I recently was watching this weekend, looking at his tape, is Joseph Osai out of Texas, the University of Texas. He's a guy that I think would be a great pass rusher. He's a guy that's multifaceted, being that we're going to run a defense with Dean Pease that is like multiple fronts, like 4-3 and 3-4 responsibilities or principles. I think that a guy like Joseph Osai out of Texas, he's like 6'4", 255 pounds, but he's a guy that can play linebacker, and he can actually come off the edge, whether he's putting his hand in the dirt or whether he's in like that 2-point stance. With Quitty Pay, I think he's more of a guy that's more of your typical 4-3 type of defensive end, a guy that's mainly, good at stopping the run and plays with a really high motor. I don't know about as far as his technique. He's not the best when it comes to pass rushing the Quitty Pay. I see New Drop in the building. What's going on, New Drop? He says Ronnie Perkins. I've seen a little bit of tape on Ronnie Perkins. I do think that Ronnie Perkins is another guy I believe he played at Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. I do think that he's a guy that could possibly be a depth piece as well. And I wouldn't mind Ronnie Perkins as well. I think he's a guy that we could also take a look at playing that edge rusher position. But I think whatever we do, we need to take multiple guys in the trenches. We got to do it because if you look at the teams that consistently win, and we've talked about it numerous times, the Buccaneers, who just recently won the Super Bowl, strength in numbers. We need as many players as we can in as far as depth. I don't know if you guys seen as well, but breaking news today, they were talking about the NFL is extending from 16 game regular season to a 17 game regular season. So that's another reason why we need to, draft as many guys and sign as many guys as we can as far as depth, because we know that injuries are bound to happen. So I definitely think that we need multiple pieces when it comes to that defensive line. I see someone saying Penei Sewell, Alex. I like Penei Sewell as well. But personally, I think right now we could do without going that high and taking a guy like Penei Sewell. At first, I was on that train of taking a Penei Sewell. I wouldn't be mad with the fourth pick if we went Penei Sewell. But I think with a Penei Sewell, you could actually either let Matt Gono play that position. He's a guy that can fill in at that guard position and possibly be the starter. Or I think later on in the draft, you could possibly bring in a guy that can play that guard position. Because to be honest with all of you guys in the chat, Penei Sewell is a guy really that's a tackle. So if we were to get Penei Sewell, he can play. He can play that actual position, the guard position. But I think tackle is pretty much all of the games he played in college at Oregon. His main primary position is playing left and right tackle. So I think a guy like Penei Sewell, if he's on the board and we want to draft somebody at 4, I could see a guy like Penei Sewell. But personally, I would go defense because we need balance. And on this team right now, I feel like with us taking Chris Lindstrom and then us taking Caleb McGarry, both of those guys in the first round, we had TD here 2 years ago, we kind of have we don't need a whole offensive line full of first round picks. So I feel like we kind of need to spread the wealth out. And over the last couple of years, when we had a guy like Thomas Dimitroff here, he was big on taking offensive players. Like we took Calvin Ridley and kind of reached. So I think that we need to build this defense, and we need some playmakers on the defense, more playmakers on that defensive side of the ball. Miss Maggie, we appreciate that $5 holla in the super chat. She basically said for reaching the milestone, congratulations, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate each and every one of you in the chat for recently helping me hit 1,000 subscribers, which we hit that milestone of 1,000 subscribers last week. So I really appreciate each and every one of you guys for continuing to support your boy, continuing to tune into the channel. Now we're trying to get AFN to 1,000. Well, we really appreciate you guys. I see somebody saying Justin Fields in the chat. Hold on, let's get to this $10 holla. We definitely need to stack on our defense. Defense wins championships. I really, first off, appreciate that $10 super chat, and I completely agree. We have to continue to build depth on the defense, and I also feel like we need playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. Like we have guys like Foye Luakan, we have guys like Dion Jones. That's playmakers on that defensive side, guys like Grady Jarrett. But we lost a key piece in a guy like Keanu Neal. And I do think that on the defensive side of the ball, we do need to go out and bring in another safety. That's another position that I really think we need to address in this draft. And I wouldn't be upset with the Falcons if we decided with that fourth pick, if we feel like one of these guys that are at that safety position, I do believe trading back would be the best case scenario. But I wouldn't be surprised even if the Falcons decided to trade back and then possibly bring in a safety at that first round position. We've talked about a guy like Andre Cisco out of Syracuse. He's a guy that's a playmaker, a ball hawk. Not only can tackle well, but he's like a honey badger. He's opportunistic, and he's a guy that can take the ball away. I think he's a guy that I would look at bringing in. Also, the guy Trevon Merrick out of TCU. He's another guy that everybody's talking about as a great, safety, an opportunistic safety, has great coverage ability, and can take the ball away as well. A guy like Richie Grant out of UFC. He's another guy that I think the Falcons should look at. I don't know with the first round pick if you would go with a guy like Richie Grant, but maybe with that second round pick, I could really see the Falcons going out and bringing in a guy like that. Miss Asia, I see you in the chat. She says, "What's up, Miss Asia?" She says, "Surtain." I like Patrick Surtain, but I think I wouldn't go that high for a defensive back. Being that we took AJ Terrell last year with that first round pick, I mean, unless you just wanted to grab another guy to be a lockdown corner on the opposite side of AJ Terrell, I really feel like in this draft, it's deep with cornerbacks. Like I watched a lot of tape. You got Patrick Surtain. My favorite cornerback in this draft is J.C. Horn out of South Carolina, the son of Joe Horn, the former New Orleans Saint wide receiver. I like him a lot. J.C. Horn is a guy that's physical, tackles well, long arms, goes about 6'1", and he's just a dog. Patrick Surtain is another guy. His father played in the league as well with the Miami Dolphins years ago. And I think he has the measurables as well. Patrick Surtain is like 6'1", 6'2", played at Alabama. So, he's played the top, against top competition. He's another guy that if the Falcons want to go cornerback, I mean, he's one of the top, highly touted corners. I just feel like we really need to build the trenches. Like, I feel like the trenches are the most important thing right now for the Falcons. And personally, that's what I would roll with. I would go with with a safety. I would go with one of the trench players. Excuse me. I would go one of the trench players over taking a safety or a corner with their first pick because I really feel like everything starts up front. Whether we go defensive line or whether we go offensive line, I feel like whoever's the first pick, we need to take somebody in the trenches. Whether it's an offensive lineman or defensive lineman. Personally, I'm going for a guy on the defensive side of the ball because I feel like TD kind of made this team unbalanced with us taking all of those offensive, players like Calvin Ridley, and then us taking 2 offensive linemen in the first round 2 seasons ago. I really think that it's time to kind of balance things out. And last year we went AJ Terrell. We started off with a secondary player in the first round. So now I think it's time to balance it out a little bit. And I think we need to go defensive line. But you guys definitely put your questions in the chat because we're gonna be answering your questions too. If it's a player that you think we should go with, I want to hear from you guys. But personally, if it was me and if we were to go corner, I'm going J.C. Horn. If we want to take a guy like in the first round, if we trade back, or if we go with even a corner in the second round, if J.C. Horn is there, even over Patrick Surtain, I'm taking a J.C. Horn. I think to me, just from what I've seen, to me, he's personally the best all-around corner in the draft. You have guys like Caleb Farley, who I've seen Devon saying Caleb Farley, he would pick him over Surtain. I think Caleb Farley, if I'm not mistaken, had like a back problem, or they saying that he needed to have surgery. I do think Caleb Farley may be the best athlete in this draft out of Virginia Tech at corner. He's another guy that's extremely gifted athletically, but I don't think he has the best technique. Now, he is a playmaker, kind of like an AJ Terrell. Well, he's another guy that's very opportunistic. But I did see when I watched Caleb Farley's tape, to me, he kind of has he's kind of ultra aggressive sometimes, and sometimes he struggles with his technique. So personally, I like Caleb Farley. I just wouldn't take him with a first round pick. I think he's definitely athletically gifted enough if he gets his technique together. But I'm kind of scared of the injuries, the injuries that they're saying that he possibly has. His physicals are not the best. So I'm a little nervous about us taking players that have injury problems in college. We've seen with, guys like Tat McKinley that we brought in with those shoulder issues, and we've seen guys that we just let go, like Keanu Neal, that this regime with Terry Fontenot, they're not, they're not playing when it comes to guys with injury history. It doesn't look like they're signing guys or drafting guys. I doubt they'll draft a guy that has a physical like Caleb Farley. Let's see. What's up, Michael Walker in the chat? What's going on, man? He said Dreadhead Hayden is on his last year and he is 28 years old. We need to find a replacement. Draft Kyle Pitts. Speed Falcons for life, man. What's up, man? I agree with you. I mean, I like Kyle Pitts a lot. As a tight end, I do think he'll be a game changer and definitely a playmaker for our Atlanta Falcons. So I'm not against taking a guy like Kyle Pitts because I do think he's a generational type talent. But in the same breath, I think that we need to go defense. Like, unless we're going to stay at that fourth spot and we're not getting the calls that we want, meaning Terry Fontenot isn't getting that trade up from another team that's offering multiple second round picks and maybe even future first round picks. That's the only way I see us possibly going with a guy like Kyle Pitts at 4. If you go with a guy like Kyle Pitts at 4, I feel like then the rest of the draft has to be most of the rest of the draft has to be defense. Definitely our second and third, and even maybe our fourth round pick. I think you have to draft the trenches if you take a guy like a Kyle Pitts, because Kyle Pitts is kind of like a luxury right now for us. I don't think he's a need. I think we will kind of be reaching, and that's what I was talking about as far as talent over need. I feel like the Falcons kind of have been drafting when TD was here. We've kind of been drafting talent over drafting needs, and I feel like that's kind of why we're in the position that we're in the trenches situation where we don't have those guys that we need in the trenches, and we haven't had a consistent pass rush due to us, not taking the best defensive player available. Because sometimes we hear BPA and we say take the best player available, but I feel like, and I understand where Terry coming from. He's been saying best player available. I see Speed Falcons for life right here. He says best player available. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, Kyle Pitts, or he's saying that even a quarterback. My thoughts on the quarterback, personally, I don't know if I would go with a guy like a quarterback at this point. I mean, the guy that I like in this draft at QB would possibly be a guy like Trey Lance. He's a guy that I think has a great ceiling, and he's a guy that I think could do some things. But as far as taking a quarterback at 4, I think it's too high. And to be honest, I think the first 3 picks are going to be quarterbacks. Like, I think the reason that the 49ers traded up was to draft a guy maybe like Zach Wilson, even maybe Trey Lance. I mean, you never know. Personally, I think they traded up probably for a guy like Zach Wilson. I think that's the person that they're looking at. But it could be Trey Lance or it could be Justin Fields. I just think at 4, we don't need to take a quarterback. If you looked at the Green Bay Packers last year going with what's the kid? Jordan Love. I think they kind of reached at that pick, and they were in the NFC Championship game. So some people can say it panned out. Personally, I don't feel like it panned out because they had a home NFC Championship game and they weren't able to make it to the Super Bowl. And I really feel like if they would have drafted maybe another receiver or even maybe another defensive player, a more impactful defensive player on that defensive side of the ball, like they would have took maybe a cornerback or maybe even another trench player, like a guy who could pass rush, I really think that could have helped them as far as facing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that NFC Championship game. We've seen the guy, Kevin King, who they had playing that second corner position, pretty much was getting abused the whole game. He gave up that crucial touchdown in late in the first half to Scotty Miller. And then when the game clinching play was Kevin King basically getting that penalty on a 3rd down where he had that holding penalty. So I really feel like that Jordan Love pick, I think the Packers are kind of regretting taking Jordan Love with that first round pick. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers was really pleased with them going with a guy like Jordan Love when they could have brought in either, like I said, another guy, another wide receiver that could have been impactful on the other side of a guy like Devontae Adams, or possibly, bringing in more depth on the defensive line. Like they possibly could have brought in another defensive end, or they could have drafted another cornerback, to play on the opposite side of um, the kid that got Jair Alexander. I think he's like a Pro Bowl, he's a Pro Bowler. So they could have, drafted a guy, and Kevin King could have been like the nickel, or been, maybe the fourth cornerback on their team. But I really feel like them not, them taking that quarterback, I really feel like that hurt the depth of the team, of the offense and the defense. I feel like it hurt the Packers as an organization taking that quarterback that early, when they could have went and got a player that would have impacted even the offensive lineman possibly would have worked for the Packers as well, because they had some injuries. I believe Bakhtiari, who is like their left tackle, he was injured. And they had a couple injuries on the offensive line, so they could have got more depth on the offensive line as well with that first pick. So I really feel like them taking that Jordan Love was really a reach. Let's see what y'all questions in the chat. Let's see. He says Falcons trying to sell tickets. They not trading down. It's Lance or Pitts first round. Joel Bell, I appreciate you tuning in. To be honest, I'm not too sure. I feel like trading down would be the move. I mean, I hate to disagree with you. I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Trey Lance on the team, or even a Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts over Trey Lance. If we want to take somebody at 4, I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Kyle Pitts on our team, because Hayden Hurst could be a guy you could trade, or he could be a guy that's going after next season, from my understanding. So you could be replacing a guy like Hayden Hurst with a more athletic, more talented guy in Kyle Pitts. But Trey Lance, the reason I don't want to go quarterback is because we have Matt Ryan still here for at least another year or two. So, why, especially with us doing the restructure with Matt Ryan's contract, I feel like we should go all in. If we really want to win a Super Bowl, and we've pretty much kept, the veteran guys and the franchise guys here, like Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, as long as we got those two guys on offense, and Jake Matthews, some of the cornerstones of our offense, and some of the cornerstones of this team, I feel like we should just stick with Matt Ryan and give these guys as many weapons as possible. So build the defense. I would build the trenches. I would build the offensive line, the defensive line, and then I would go out and address the secondary. Bring in a couple more safeties, a couple more playmakers. If you want to bring in an outside linebacker / edge like a Michael Parsons, I'm even in favor of that over taking a quarterback at this point, because Matt Ryan has consistently shown us that he's doing it on a high level. 10 consecutive seasons with 4,000 passing yards. I mean, at this point, I'm done with doubting a guy like Matt Ryan, and I feel like a lot of you fans should be over this Matt Ryan hate or doubting this man. I mean, he's pretty much done everything other than win a Super Bowl in his career, his Hall of Fame career. So at this point, I think we should go all in, kind of like what the Denver Broncos did a couple years ago with Peyton Manning, when they knew Peyton Manning pretty much was on his last leg. He was on the back half of his career, or back end of his career, and they just built the defense around him, and they gave him as many weapons as possible on offense. So I feel like that's what our Falcons should do as well. Also, another position I think in this draft that we need to address, and I think it's a huge piece of the Arthur Smith offense, is a running back. Like, yeah, I know we did bring in a guy like Mike Davis from the Carolina Panthers, and I do like Mike Davis a lot. I think he can be the starter or the bridge guy for our Atlanta Falcons. But personally, I think we should draft a running back. And I wouldn't be against drafting a running back, maybe say as high as the second round. I know I've talked about, running backs being around in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. We've seen guys come in the league and be Pro Bowlers, not being taken that high as a running back. But being that Arthur Smith's offense is run heavy, I wouldn't be against taking a guy like Travis Etienne, a guy like the kid out of Alabama, Najee Harris. I wouldn't be against that. In the the first second round pick, or if we trade down and we get multiple second round picks. But one of those second round picks, if one of those running backs is there that we feel like is, a top back in the game, or a top back coming out of coming out of college, which on my board I have it as ETN being the best running back coming out. Then a guy like Najee Harris, Javonte Williams is another guy out of North Carolina that I think will be a good running back. Trey Sermon, he's a guy out of Ohio State. I like him as well. So it's a number of running backs you can take. If you're gonna take a running back later on in the draft, I'm looking at a guy like Chuba Hubbard. Out of, I believe he played at UCLA if I'm not mistaken. But Chuba Hubbard is a guy that rushed for like 2,000 or over 2,000 yards in 2019, I believe. So it's a number of running backs in this draft. But if I'm the Falcons, I'm looking at taking a running back maybe in the second round. That's another thing I would think about doing, because Arthur Smith, his whole offense is basically predicated off of the run like he had in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. So if you can go get a bell cow or a guy that's a legit, running back, that's a guy that I definitely would, that could come in and be the legitimate starter. Because I think a guy like Mike Davis is mainly a number 2 back. I do think he can be the starter, because we're going to go running back by committee, whoever we draft, no matter what. Even if we bring in a guy like Najee Harris, or we bring in a guy like Travis Etienne, I still think that the Falcons are going to do running back by committee. So it really doesn't matter. But I really think that Mike Davis, to me, is a guy that's going to have to split carries. Like, he's not going to be the guy that takes the bulk of the carries. I think that whoever we draft, he's going to split carries with them. And then I also see a guy like Ito Smith possibly being the guy that you bring in on third down who can catch balls out of the backfield, similar to like a James White, or, one of those scat backs. That's how they use the scat backs in the league. A guy that you're not going to, rely on running the ball between the numbers, but a guy that you can actually use on swing passes, a guy that you can use on jet sweeps and things of that nature. And I think that Smith was fit, that particular style perfect if we were to use him as like the third down back. We got another super chat from my man Terror Artist 404, $9.99. We appreciate it, man. He says, congratulations on 1K, getting monetized. Do you see us drafting Kyle Pitts or trading back with that number 4 pick? And I talked about this a little bit. I think that we're going to trade back. I don't really think the Falcons are going to take Kyle Pitts at 4. I do think that he's worthy. Don't get me wrong. I think he's worthy of the 4th pick, but I feel like the Falcons need to address defense. I think defense is what's been lacking since really 2017, after going to the Super Bowl in 2016 and then going back to the playoffs, making a deep playoff run in 2017. We haven't made it. We didn't make the playoffs since 2017. And I think 2018, 2019, and 2020, the main issues was not being able to rush the passer and not being able to run the ball in the trenches and, play physical. So I really think that our biggest need in this draft would be addressing the trenches. Like, I would go out and bring in as many defensive linemen as possible, as much talent as possible, to create competition, because we talked about it numerous times. Like, Terry Fontenot has talked about it when they had their interviews. Both Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, when they were hired, they both kind of talked about, we're going to bring in quarterbacks, we're going to bring in wide receivers, we're going to bring in every position. Every position is going to be a competition in training camp. If we have preseason games, we want these guys to go out and have to compete for a spot. We don't want guys to just automatically be given, being privileged and given these starting roles. Like, I really do feel like when Dan Quinn was here, they didn't give guys fair opportunity. Like, we had guys like, Charles Harris. We had guys like Jacob Tuioti Mariner who really didn't get a shot until Pat McKinley was released. So guys like John Kaminsky, some of these guys that should have been playing, Deidre Sanat, they didn't get the opportunities because, a lot of the head coaches, the head coach and the coaching staff basically went with guys that they trusted, and they really didn't give these other guys a fair shake. So I really feel like at this point, we need to address defense. We need to add balance. I talked about it early in the stream. Like, balance is the name of the game right now. We have to balance out this Atlanta Falcons team. I feel like the offensive side of the ball has enough talent. The only position I really feel like we need to address on the offensive side that's a must is the running back position, because we only have Ito Smith, from my understanding, and Mike Davis. I don't believe we have any other running backs like that are, that are the caliber that we need. A guy that's not being talked about that I love and you guys know is Brian Hill. I don't know, where Brian Hill is or what's going on with Brian Hill, but he's a guy that was a free agent, and it doesn't look like the Falcons are trying to bring him back. So I don't know, what's good with that. But I definitely think that we should, definitely should give Brian Hill another chance. I don't know if the regime just didn't really like him or they didn't think he would fit Arthur Smith's scheme. I don't know if they didn't like his tape. Personally, I think that a guy like Brian Hill would fit, but these coaches know best on who, which players they went and watched watch these players on tape. They know which one of these guys, that was currently on the roster would fit their scheme. Personally, I would have at least tried to bring Brian Hill back, maybe on like a 1-year deal, a prove it deal, and just add him to the mix of that rotation. And then maybe we would need to take a running back, early on. But I definitely would have gave Brian Hill another chance to come back with the squad and see what he could do. But we got another super chat, $4.99 from Todd. We appreciate it, man. $4.99 or $5 holler. He says, Sewell or Sewell is possibly the best player in the draft at the second most important position in football. What are your chances the Jets get him? To be honest with you, there's a possibility that the Jets may take a guy like Penei Sewell, being that they said they were going to try to give Darnold, I believe is their name, the name of their quarterback. I believe they said they were going to give Darnold a chance to be the starter because they feel like he didn't really get a fair shake with the coach that they had there with New York that was fired with the Jets. I think Adam Gase, who I can't, really can't stand as a coach. I don't think that he should have ever gotten that job as the Jets head coach in the first place. But I agree. I do think that Sewell could be a player that they look at. From what I'm hearing, just out of rumors, everybody's saying that they're in love with a quarterback as well. They're in love with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. That's what a lot of people are saying, is that the Jets might go quarterback because they brought in a new coach or a new regime and they may want to start over. But I could see the Jets taking a guy like a Penei Sewell. They could possibly definitely go, for the trenches and try to protect Sam Darnold. And I think, to be honest with you, if I were the Jets, I think that would be the smartest move if you're the Jets. Unless you're going to trade Sam Darnold, being that they took him early in the first round a couple years ago, I really think that they should try to build around him. And that's what I'm talking about with a guy like Matt Ryan. Like, when you get a quarterback, you have to build around these guys. Like, I'm getting tired of hearing Matt Ryan, has all of the weapons in the world. Like, as a quarterback in this league, if you're going to be successful, you have to have pieces around you. And I feel like the Jets have done a good job so far in free agency of bringing in Corey Davis. I think they got from the Titans, and they've brought in a number of guys on that offensive side of the ball for Sam Darnold to try to build around him. I feel like the last couple of years, he didn't have a good coaching staff, and he didn't have a good offensive line, and he really didn't have any weapons on the outside at wide receiver, to be completely honest. He didn't have a legitimate number 1 or number 2 wide receiver. So I definitely could see Penei Sewell going to the Jets. I think that would be smart. If I'm the GM of the Jets, that's what I'm doing. I'm going and building around a guy like Sam Darnold and giving him a chance, because the Jets always pretty much have had a decent defense. So I definitely would look at bringing in a guy like Penei Sewell on the offensive line for the Jets if I'm them. Let's see here. Someone said Olsen too. I do think that Olsen's another guy that hasn't gotten a fair shake as well. So I do believe that's a good point, Alex. And I see you in the chats too, Asia, saying that the running back position, Olsen didn't get a fair shake. Like, I agree. I don't think that a guy like Quadri Olsen got a fair shake as well. I do think that he's a guy that's physical. To me, he's a player just like Mike Davis. So when I seen that Mike Davis signing, that kind of made me kind of back off of the Quadri Olsen getting a fair shake. I really don't know if this coaching staff or this regime believes in a guy like Quadri Olsen, because with them bringing in a guy like Mike Davis, it kind of doesn't look good for a guy like a Quadri Olson from the standpoint of, for one, I haven't even heard Arthur Smith or any of these guys mention his name. I heard them mention Edo Smith's name as possibly being a guy, and they said we'll do running back by committee, but I haven't heard too much out of a Quadri Olson. I do think that Olson, like I said, is kind of the Michael Turner, Mike Davis. He cut from that same cloth, a smaller guy, kind of built like a brick house, a stocky type of guy, built like a tree stump, but is physical, can run the ball between tackles, a straight line runner, a guy that's going to hit the hole hard, that's not going to, tippy toe at the line. And I think that he's another guy that needs to be given a fair shake as well, because I don't think that a guy like a Quadri Olson was given a fair shake with the last regime. In 2019, I think he led our team in like touchdowns in the red zone or something like that. And then for whatever reason, in 2020, Dirk Cutter just, for whatever reason, whether it was him or Dan Quinn, they didn't even have this guy dressing for games. So this guy pretty much was just a depth piece, I guess, for for our team. See another question. Oh, this is Pops in the chat. I appreciate you tuning in, Pops. He just calling, giving some encouragement. I appreciate that. Let's see. Would you trade back and draft Farley to help out AJ Terrell? Andrew, I appreciate you tuning in. Personally, I talked about Caleb Farley a little bit earlier in the chat. I don't know if he was in here or in the live stream, but Caleb Farley is a guy that, from what I'm hearing, he has some issues, some medical issues. I think they say he has like some back problems and he might need surgery or something like that. So I don't know if I want a guy coming in that has injury problems. Like back issues are, can be a pain. And that's something that you don't want to play around with, especially with a collision sport like football. Not saying that Caleb Farley, can't come back and be a guy that, could be a Pro Bowler in this league or be someone that could be a key player for Atlanta Falcons. I do think that some team is going to take a chance on him because he's extremely athletic and he has a lot of God-given gifts. But personally, I wouldn't go with a guy like Caleb Farley just for the mere fact of our bad history with injured players. Like we are known for taking guys that have injury issues, starting with a guy like Prayer Jerry. That was the defensive tackle that we drafted years ago. And then the Tat McKinley situation with those shoulder issues. I'm not feeling Caleb Farley because of those injuries. I do think that he's a guy, like I said, out of Virginia Tech that is opportunistic and he could be a playmaker. He just has some technique issues and he's extremely aggressive. So I do like his style. I do think that he's probably one of the best athletes on the defensive backs, out of the defensive backs. But those injuries, make me nervous. Let's see here. I see somebody says Farley is like Phillips. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Andrew. Oh, Alex, I agree with you, Alex. Like Farley is one of those guys, like Phillips. He has those injury issues because I heard Jalen Phillips is a guy at that edge position that's had concussion issues. So, he's another guy that I'm not too sure if I want to. If it's out of taking Jalen Phillips and taking a guy like Greg Rousseau, I'm going with a guy like Greg Rousseau just for the mere fact of not only the injury, the concussion issues, but also those God-given ability. Like you can't teach that size, being 6'7" and just towering over everybody. I don't know if you guys remember a player like David Irvin. He was a guy that played for the Cowboys a couple years ago. He's no longer in the league. But he was a guy that was just like a physical specimen. He was built like a power forward. He was like 6'7", 6'8", just a huge mountain of a man. A guy like Calais Campbell, who I've loved in the league for many, many years. He's a guy that's like 6'8", and he plays that defensive tackle position. He played with the Cardinals for a bunch of years, and then recently played with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Helped them get to the AFC Championship against the Patriots a couple years ago. And then I think last year he played with the Ravens. So I love those guys that are just, has that size, because you can't teach those long arms. You can't teach that size. Like you're either born with it or you're not born with it. And I think a guy like Greg Rousseau, who we've seen do it on a college level, have 15 plus sacks and things of that nature in one season, sat out last season. So he should be really healthy and been working from what I hear, been working with pro guys, working on his technique and stuff like that. I mean, he should come into camp, and come ready to play if we do draft a guy like Greg Rousseau. And I just feel like his ceiling is so high that he's a guy I would take a chance on if I were the Falcons, because he has the backing, he has the stats in college, and he has all of the God-given ability. So with us having guys like Dean Pease, yeah, man, I would take my chances with a guy like Greg Rousseau. If we trade back in the first round, I would like to hear Greg Rousseau's name get called for the first pick for our Atlanta Falcons this year. I appreciate it. Mom's in the chat with the 1999 super chat. I appreciate that. She said, congrats on 1,000 subscribers. Hey, I appreciate you guys continuing to share out my content. I appreciate it. I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you guys continuing to tune in and sharing out the content. But not only on my channel, but let's help Atlanta Falcons Nation. Like, we're on our way to 1,000 at Atlanta Falcons Nation as well. So please hit that subscribe button, not just at Jew Talk Sports, but also hit that subscribe button at Atlanta Falcons Nation as well. But let's see here. Ghost Peppers, what's up, Ghost Peppers? He said, I like to see what Olsen has. Okay, so Olsen and Davis. Also looking forward to seeing a warrior like Lee Smith. What can we add to what he can add to the running game? Hey, I agree with you, Ghost Peppers. Like, I think that combination of Olsen and Davis, that's a physical backfield. If you got those two guys for 4 quarters running the ball at you, and after a while, someone's got to give after a while. If running right at the teeth of a defense with those two physical specimens, those physical running backs, and that physical style, like we had when we had Mike Smith here as a head coach, I could really see the Falcons, using those guys in tandem. Even a guy like Najee Harris. Najee Harris is another guy that's a big physical running back, a bruiser, a guy not only that can hits the hole hard and runs between the tackles, but Najee Harris is a guy who can also run on the outside. Kind of like Brian Hill, because Brian Hill is like 6'1", 220. That's the same thing with like a guy like Najee Harris. I think he's 6 feet plus, and a guy that's physical, hurdles, and does all of those things, kind of like, and to a lesser degree, of a Derrick Henry type. I do think that those two guys, Olsen and Davis, that would be a tandem with those guys running. And then with Lee Smith at tight end, I don't know if you guys got to check out Lee Smith's interview last week, but he talked about, coming to the Atlanta Falcons. He wanted to play with Matt Ryan, and he talked about also not really wanting to play with a team that was rebuilding. And he says usually a team that's rebuilding brings in a quarterback. And he talked about not really wanting to play with a young quarterback. So that should just go to show you, Lee Smith is a guy that played with the New England Patriots, played with the Buffalo Bills this past season and the last couple seasons. He's played for winning organizations since he's been in the league. And he's a guy that basically stated he didn't want to play with a young quarterback. So that should just tell you guys, everybody that's shooting for a guy like a Zach Wilson or a Justin Fields in the first round, that just goes to show you, like, a veteran like Lee Smith, a guy who's been in the league over a decade. He talked about wanting to play with a future Hall of Famer like Matt Ryan, a guy that he feels has a lot left in the tank, and a guy that he feels like could get him over the hump and possibly get him to a Super Bowl. So I completely agree with you, Ghost Peppers. I think that Lee Smith is going to be one of those guys. He talked about it. He's not a guy that's going to be catching, 50, 60 passes in the season. He's one of those guys that's gritty on the end of your offensive line. Gritty is going to block down on defensive ends and collapse the defensive line. A guy that's going to protect Matt Ryan. He talked about his main thing is keeping Matt Ryan upright. So I love to see guys that's want to come in and be there to protect Matt Ryan, because Matt Ryan has been one of the most sacked quarterbacks over the last 3, 4, 5 seasons. So I definitely think Lee Smith is going to add, he's going to be an asset to our offense just for his skill set. And that's why if we do go with a guy like Kyle Pitts in the draft, we'll have multiple tight ends that can do multiple different things, because we all know that Kyle Pitts isn't a guy that you're going to use in the goal line situations to block. You're going to use a guy like Lee Smith, who is going to play the role of a guy like Luke Stalker, who came in and didn't do a good job of filling that role of being that blocking tight end. But I do think that Lee Smith is going to be a guy that can come in and do that at a high level, be the guy that's going to do the dirty work on the offensive line and be that dirty work type of player, that blue collar type player that's going to bring his lunch pail to work. I like this. I like this right here. I think it's Khalil Hunter, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I said your name right. I like this comment. He said Michael Parsons is the pick if we run in a 3-4 defense. And I agree. I like Michael Parsons a lot. If we call Michael Parsons' name at 4, I definitely think that Michael Parsons is a guy that's a playmaker. If you go pull up his highlight tape, that dude is a playmaker. He plays with his hair on fire, has a high motor. If you guys watched his pro day, I think he ran like a 4.3 40, and he had a crazy vertical, and he's a guy that can do it all. So I think of Michael Parsons, being that he's a guy that you can use on the edge, he's another guy that's physical. Not only can he play the linebacker position, like the inside linebacker or outside linebacker position, but he's another guy that can give you some edge rush as well. So I wouldn't be opposed to bringing in a guy like a Michael Parsons. I agree with you. Michael Parsons is a guy that I would definitely like the Falcons to bring in because he's a guy that plays with edge and he's a playmaker. And like I told you guys, like we need as many playmakers on the defense as possible because right now, majority of our playmakers are on the offensive side of the football. We have a couple guys on the defensive side like Foyer, Malua Khan, Dion Jones, AJ Terrell is one of those guys that proved last season that he's a playmaker, but we don't have enough of those guys on the defensive line. We don't have enough of those guys on the edge. And Michael Parsons is a guy that you can use on the edge. The only thing that bothers me with the Michael Parsons is can he rush or be that edge player consistently? Because I don't know if Michael Parsons is a guy that you want to use every single play on the edge, being that he's not the biggest guy. Now, I do think that he's a guy that can do it at a high level. I'm just not too sure will he hold up because we've seen guys, even though they weren't using the correct way, like Vic Beasley, who was extremely athletic as well. I think Michael Parsons may be a better player than a Vic Beasley. Just by this, even in college, I feel like he was a better player, all around player at Penn State than a guy like Vic Beasley who played at Clemson. But I'm not too sure if Michael Parsons can be a guy that can consistently give you edge rush like a guy if we were to bring in a Greg Rousseau or a Jalen Phillips who consistently did that. And that's pretty much all they did in college. Michael Parsons, if you go look at his tape, he's a linebacker that they used all over the field. They used him on the inside as an inside linebacker. They used him like as a will linebacker where he was covering kind of like Foyer and Dion Jones. He wasn't used a ton as an edge rusher. They used him typically as a traditional linebacker, inside linebacker. So that's the only thing that kind of bothers me with going with a guy like a Michael Parsons is can he consistently give you that edge rush? That's the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous about a Michael Parsons. But we're gonna open it up for you guys. Like if you guys have questions, as far as Q&A, I only want to be on here for like an hour 30 minutes. So you guys, drop those questions below. But basically, that's what I wanted to hit on. Is just like I really feel like at this point, the main premise of the video is, or this live stream is, I believe that the Falcons need to go and need over talent. Like we've been taking talent for the last, couple seasons. We've been, really admiring the sexy picks and not picking those guys that do the dirty work. We need some of those guys that's going to be blue collar type players. We need a guy next to Grady Jarrett that's going to be able to man double teams and free up Grady Jarrett so he can be be that pass rusher that he is at the 3 tech. But we need a guy. We really need like a 1 tech, a guy. If we're going to play 3-4, if you look at the teams that's been successful running the 3-4, even with Dean Pease, he's always had the Vince Wilforks when he was with New England, the Lawrence guys of the world that played with New England. Those bigger players, the Daquan Jones when he was in Tennessee, he had those guys that were space eaters that could play that 1 tech. And that's kind of what the Falcons have been missing over the last, I'll say, 5 to 6 years. We've been missing ever since we lost Rashid Hageman. We've kind of been struggling at that 1 tech. We don't really have a guy that can just eat up space, and we need one of those guys that we can just plug in the middle and a guy that can just swallow up space. Because I feel like the Tyler Davison, he really hasn't done a great job at being impactful as the one tech or being that lockdown player, that guy that can consistently get penetration in the run game and even in the pass rush situations. I really feel like the Falcons need to go out and get them a Vita Vea type player, a Dominican Sue type player, a dominant defensive tackle. Christian Barmore was a guy that I did a video on a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago. He's a guy out of Alabama that plays the nose position in the three tech. He's a guy that can consistently get pressure. He's a big guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he's a guy that can play that position. But I would like the Falcons to go out maybe in the second or third round or even the fourth round and go get you a big space eater, a guy that's going to eat up space, going to free up Grady Jarrett so he can, get the sacks, because we haven't seen Grady Jarrett get the sack numbers that we're looking for, because he's basically been playing the one tech, being the one tech and being the three tech. He hasn't had that guy that consistently could free him up, and he's basically been facing all of the double teams. And we really need Grady to get to the money this year. We need him to be the guy that's getting after things up front and being freed up. Let's see here. It says most elite quarterback in the league have their offense 65% or higher. I'm not understanding the question. It says most elite quarterbacks in the league have their offense 65% or higher. Yeah, I'm not too sure what he's saying right there. Maybe he's talking about passer completion or something like that. Miss Maggie, with Dion Jones restructuring his contract, who do you think we should be the next to help with cap? Miss Maggie, that's a good question. Personally, I think Grady Jarrett could be a guy that we see get restructured. Now that we've seen Dion Jones get restructured. And the reason I say that is we've talked about it here on Atlanta Falcons Nation on my channel, Jew Talk Sports, that anytime you restructure a contract, basically you're just kicking that money a little bit further down to the next years. And that basically just means that these are players that you're not looking to cut. It kind of says that these are the players that you're going to be bringing back with the team. So I think Grady Jarrett should be one of those guys that's solidified to be here for at least through the end of his contract, the contract extension that he got. Now, personally, I'm not too sure, what Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot thinks about a guy like Grady Jarrett. I mean, personally, I know Dean Pease probably loves a guy like Grady Jarrett, but I'm not too sure what Terry Fontenot, thinks about him, because in New Orleans, they had a number of guys that they rotated at that nose position. They didn't have that dominant nose. They had a guy like Shelvin Rankins and Onyemata, but those guys didn't have huge contracts like Grady Jarrett. They weren't the Pro Bowl style players that Grady Jarrett is. So I think Grady Jarrett should be safe personally. Of course, we don't know, what Terry Fontenot is thinking and what the front office is thinking, how they feel about Grady Jarrett. If I were the Falcons, that would have been possibly the first player that I would have restructured, other than Matt Ryan and Dion Jones. The first player I would have looked at, because of his age, and I think Grady Jarrett is still in his prime and has a lot left in the tank because he's still a young player, like in his mid-20s. I think that Grady Jarrett should have been one of the first guys that we looked at restructuring. So I think we have, it's going to be some interesting news coming out this week, in the next couple weeks, leading up to the draft. That's going to be telling if Grady Jarrett is going to be a guy that they're going to keep around. A guy they're going to keep around for years to come. Is he going to be a guy that's going to be a part of, a cornerstone of this defense? We know when Dan Quinn was here and when Thomas Dimitroff was here, Grady Jarrett, being that he got that huge contract, he was a guy that they definitely thought was going to be a cornerstone for this defense and for this team. But I don't know what the current regime, how they feel. If they feel like Grady Jarrett is still the cornerstone of the defense. Personally, I do think that Dion Jones, Afoye Aluakon, and Grady Jarrett are the cornerstones. I think those are the guys that you need to build around to a lesser degree. I think a guy like Dante Fowler, who he's in a proven year himself, being that he restructured his contract, and basically everything is based off of incentives for a guy like Dante Fowler this year to go out and prove that he deserves a big contract after this season. Because from what I heard, Dante Fowler's next year could be voided out being that he restructured that deal that he had. So this is kind of a prove it year for a guy like Dante Fowler. And I seen in the chat, I like this kid right here. Slayton, I believe his name is, out of Florida. He's a guy that's huge. He's a guy that Ghost Peppers that I really think could be a guy that the Falcons look at some point in the draft, being that guy who could be a space eater, could be a dominant one tech. And that's what the Falcons really, really need on this defense. We need a guy that's going to come in, going to do the dirty work, going to be that blue collar type player, a guy that's going to eat up all of the, eat up that space in the run game and allow Grady Jarrett to go to work. Because I think if we bring in a guy like Slayton out of Florida, and then don't forget we have guys like Marlon Davidson, who was drafted last year, to kind of be a partner of a Grady Jarrett and free Grady Jarrett up. We haven't seen the best yet of Marlon Davidson. I am an Auburn Tigers fan in college football, and I pretty much seen majority of Marlon Davidson's games in college, and he was a dominant player in college, playing with Derek Brown there in Carolina. Him and Derek Brown pretty much wrecked the whole SEC. When they were there, they were two of the most dominant tandem guys on the defensive line. Marlon Davidson was a guy that played inside and outside. He's multifaceted, and I think that's going to work great in the defensive scheme of Dean Pease, because on 4-3 situations, I do think that Marlon Davidson has the skill set to play a little bit of defensive end with his hand in the dirt, and he has the ability to play the 3 tech as well next to Grady Jarrett and play on the inside and get after the passer on like third downs and things of that nature. He could be a guy that you sub in and add depth to this defensive line. So I do think the kid Slayton out of Florida would be a guy that I definitely would look at if I'm the Falcons. I definitely think that he's a guy that could be a guy that the Falcons are looking at to play that one tech. Because like I was stating before, Dean Pease needs that one tech. He needs that big space eater. If you looked at any of the defenses that Dean Pease have coached or been a defensive coordinator, he's always had that guy that did the dirty work. Even when he was with the Baltimore Ravens, the Ravens always have guys. Like I told you guys earlier, Calais Campbell is the guy right now that they have, 6'8", 300 pounds, eats up space and creates opportunities for guys like Matt Judon and the guys that they had there on the edge. Yannick Ngakoue last year, he's the guy that was in there doing that dirty work for our team. So I definitely think, bringing in a guy like Slayton definitely would be a huge deal for our Atlanta Falcons. New drop, gonna get to the $10 holler. We need edge to have motor and chase the finish, and an interior guy like Tyler Selvin, and he's from LSU. I like Tyler Selvin a lot. Bobby Brown with power, space eaters, but still can create interior pressure. We need hunters in the front seven. Hey, I agree with you, New Drop. I completely agree. I think that all of those guys that you named, I like those guys a lot. I think Tyler Selvin, defensive end or defensive tackle, in this year's draft. I think that he's a guy that the Falcons could really use. He'll be a guy coming in day one, I feel like, and be a guy that can help Grady Jarrett free him up. Bobby Brown is another guy to a lesser degree that I think could also come in and be a guy that can help Grady Jarrett as well. But I definitely we appreciate that $10 super chat, New Drop. But I completely agree. I think Tyler Selvin is a guy that the Falcons should really look at as well. Maybe as early as if we get 2 second-round picks or even a third-round pick, I think if we get 2 second-round picks, I would look at using that second round pick to possibly bring in a guy like Selvin. If he's still there on the board in the second round, like in a later second round or mid-second round, I definitely would take a look at bringing in Tyler Selvin. I think he's a guy that could really do some things on this defensive line and help out a player like Grady Jarrett, and he can add depth because Selvin is a player, like I was mentioning, like a Vita Vea. He could play that same role. Vita Vea, that's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was drafted out of Washington University last year, I believe it was, or 2 years ago. He's a guy that pretty much helped Tom Brady win another Super Bowl. If you look at it, a lot of people are talking about Shaq Barrett and JPP. And don't get me wrong, those guys were great off the edge. But if you go and watch the tape, the guys that were wreaking havoc and pretty much shutting down everything and collapsing the pocket to allow those guys to get those one-on-one matchups, like a Shaq Barrett, was Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh. Both of those guys were pushing the pocket, not allowing Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl to get comfortable, had him pretty much backpedaling and running for his life. And all of those dudes had to do pretty much was clean up on the outside. Like Shaq Barrett, he needs to thank those guys for helping them get paid. I really think that Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea, both of those guys were the main reason that Shaq Barrett has had the seasons he's had over the last couple of years. Because if you think back, Shaq Barrett was a guy that was in Denver playing with Von on the opposite side of Von Miller, and he didn't have the success. He didn't have the success that he's having in Tampa. Like when he went to Tampa, he immediately started to have the success that he wanted, and I really think that had a lot to do with Ndamukong Suh and that those inside guys, pushing the pocket and allowing Shaq Barrett and those guys to get those one-on-one situations, him and JPP, allowing those guys to eat off the edge. But I definitely agree with you, New Drop. I think motor is everything when you talk about defensive linemen, especially edge rushers. Like we don't hear it a lot. I hear it enough when we talk about edge rushers. We always just talk about athletes being athletic and things of that nature, but we don't talk a lot about guys use it like their motor. We don't talk about the motor a lot. We talk about guys, using their hands and guys being extremely athletic and how fast, 40 times they run and things of that nature. But we don't talk a lot about guys that's not giving up on plays. And I feel like one of the players on our team that has one of the highest motors in the league and plays with one of the hottest motors in the league is a guy like Grady Jarrett. I really feel like that's what makes Grady Jarrett great. I don't know how many times I've seen a running back run down the field for like 7-8 yards or even a first down 10 yards, and a guy like Grady Jarrett is tracking him down from behind. Like that goes to show motor, effort, and you can't teach those things. Like you can't teach effort, you can't teach grit, and I think that that's what the Falcons have been missing, especially on the defensive line, is guys that play with grit and guys that play with a hot motor. And I think a guy like Jarrett Allen, that played with the Minnesota Vikings years ago, that's what made him great. He was a Minnesota Vikings and Kansas City Chief, former Kansas City Chief defensive end. That's what made Jarrett Allen great. He didn't have, all of the great attributes or anything of that nature, but he was a guy that played with one of the hottest motors in the league, and that's kind of what made him one of the best guys as far as the defensive line. He made numerous Pro Bowls due to his his motor. Another guy similar or cut off the same cloth as Jarrett Allen would be what's the kid's name? Trey Hendrickson, the guy from New Orleans. He's a guy that got paid in the offseason. He had 10 plus sacks last year for the New Orleans Saints. He played on the opposite side of Cam Jordan, and he's another guy that pretty much was dominating for the New Orleans Saints, and he ended up getting paid this offseason by the Cincinnati Bengals. So he's another guy that's not extremely gifted as far as athleticism, but he's a guy that plays with a hot motor and gets after it. And that's what we need for our Atlanta Falcons. We need guys that's going to be gritty, that's going to get after it on the defensive line, and that's going to play with that hot motor and not give up on plays, and track down guys. If they do break the pocket, be able to track down guys from behind and things of that nature. Another super chat, $10 holla. I appreciate it. This from the wife, Miss Red. I appreciate the $10 super chat. Let's see. Another question in the chat. Okay, 48 sacks that year. Yeah, I mean, I agree. The Falcons, I think he's talking about 2000 and 2004. I see someone say the Falcons led the league in sacks in 2004. The last time we had 40 sack defense. Yeah, we have to get back to that. I appreciate that comment, and I completely agree with you. Like I think 2004 we had those hunters on the defense, as New Drop was talking about. We need those guys that's going to be able to get after it, and we need, as I've talked about it, strength in numbers. Like we need numerous guys that can get after the passer. We can't just rely on one guy. Like over the last couple seasons, I really feel like we have been relying on Dante Fowler this last season to be the kind of the hero. We were relying on Vic Beasley when he was here. Even when Vic Beasley, I think his last season, he had like 6 to 8 sacks. We kind of criticized him for not being able to get 10 plus sacks in the season. But people don't realize how hard that is to do, to get 10 sacks on a season. It's really hard. Like, it's like a guy like Grady Jarrett has been a guy who hasn't hit. I don't think he's ever had 10 sacks in his career so far. So getting double-digit sacks on the season, a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, who's a former number one pick for the Houston Texans a couple years back, he's another guy that everybody thought would just come in and dominate in the league out of South Carolina University, and he's never had a 10-sack season. So I don't think that people realize how hard it is to get double-digit sacks in a season. It's really hard to accomplish double-digit sacks. So I really feel like players shouldn't just be judged or judged off of the sack numbers. I think that you have to look at the total package. Like, what does the player bring to the table? Is a guy able to, set the edge? Is he a physical player in the trenches? Is he getting tackles for loss? Because that's another thing that I look at when I'm viewing defensive guys, whether it's a defensive end, a defensive tackle, or guys that play in the front seven. I always look at the sack numbers, and I also look at the tackles for loss numbers, because that goes to show you, like, this player may not had a ton of sacks, but if they had multiple, tackles for loss, meaning 10 plus tackles for loss and things of that nature, that means that player is getting after it. Whether it's not just in the pass rush situations, but they're getting after it on the running downs and the plays where teams are running the ball. Like, Grady Jarrett is known for, tackling the running back in the backfield. We've seen him numerous times, be able to penetrate in the backfield and tackle someone for a loss. So I definitely completely agree with you with saying that we have to get back to, 40 plus sacks, or not even. I don't even feel like we need to necessarily lead the league in sacks. I just think that we need to be more physical in the trenches, and we have to be, I'll say, maybe top 10, top 15. If we can get to top 15 in the league in sacks, you're doing pretty good, because as I've said numerous times, this Falcons team is predicated on the offensive side of the ball, especially now with Arthur Smith coming in. I do think with a guy like Arthur Smith coming in, we should have a successful upcoming season. Based off of what we do in the draft, I do think a lot of those games that we lost last season, those one possession games where we lost games by less than one score, whether it was a touchdown or a field goal, I do think that we're going to win a lot more games, because if we're playing with the lead like we did a lot last year, playing in a lot of games where we had leads against the Buccaneers the first time, I think we were up 17-0 at halftime. The game against Dallas, where we had that huge lead early, week 2 of the season. The game against the Chargers, where pretty much Matt Ryan threw those, I think, 3 or 4 interceptions. A lot of those games that came down to the wire. The game against the Detroit Lions last year, I think a lot of those situations, where we had big leads, I do think this year we're going to be able to turn that around, because we're going to learn how to finish games. And the way that we finish games, we've talked about it numerous times, is pass rush and also running the football. When you have a physical team and you're able to run the football, when teams know you're trying to, ice the game away or salt the game away, when you have a team that can run the football, which we had in 2016 with Kyle Shanahan's running scheme, a lot of those games, if you remember, in 2016, we had huge leads, and the teams, tried to claw back into the game, but we were able to ice those games by just running the football and pretty much juicing the clock. And that's what we didn't see in the Super Bowl in 2016, where we had the chance where we could have just iced the game away or salt the game away by giving Devontae Freeman the ball 3 times, or just kneeling and kicking a field goal to win the game. I really feel like that's where the Falcons have struggled over the last 3 years with us missing the playoffs. I really feel like the biggest issue has been not being able to salt games away, not running the football and shortening these games. The way that you shorten the game, in the game, you have to be able to rush the passer. You have to be able to run the ball when teams know you're going to run the ball in the trenches and be physical to drain the clock in game. So we've seen it numerous times as Falcons fans. where teams have run the ball right at us when the game is on the line and we need to get a stop. We seen it last season. I think the first time we played Carolina, I believe it was, where Mike Davis, our new running back, basically just ran all over us for 150 yards in that game. And close to the end of the game, even though the game was still close, we weren't able to get off the field as a defense. We weren't able to slow down that rushing attack. So that's the reason I really feel like it's important in this draft that we go with needs. And we definitely look at drafting defensive linemen. We have to bring in defensive linemen, bring in depth on the defensive side of the ball, especially now with us going to this 17-game schedule in the regular season coming up this year. It looks like that's going to be passed where they're going to have 17 games instead of 16 games. We're going to need as much depth as possible because I've talked about it early in the stream. Like, injuries are bound to happen because it's a high collision sport. Guys are going to get concussions. Guys are going to get injured, and you got to have depth on the defensive line, the offensive line. You have to have depth at every position. And I feel like Terry Fontenot and this regime has done a good job so far of bringing in these guys on one-year deals. Let's see here. I'm gonna get back to y'all questions though. Let's see. We need a cornerback or a safety or a defensive tackle at number 4 and edge. I agree with you. I don't agree with as far as the defensive back at 4. I talked about this a little bit earlier. I wouldn't go with a defensive back at 4. I think it's too high to take a corner. Personally, I would stick with the defensive line. I would draft defensive line, defensive end, or edge. And then I would look at possibly, if we're not going to go with edge rusher, if we trade back, then I would go with safety because we do seriously need another safety. Being that we didn't bring back Keanu Neal, we let go of Ricardo Allen. The only guys that we have manning that safety position right now are Jalen Hawkins, from my understanding, and Eric. His name is leaving me right now. Eric Harris, excuse me, the guy we picked up from the Raiders. So right now we don't have any depth right now at the safety position. So I definitely think that we could definitely see the Falcons bringing in a playmaking safety. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see the Falcons draft a safety with that first round pick. Now, not at 4 because I think 4 is too high to take a safety unless it's just somebody you really has fell in love with. I do think that a guy like Andre Cisco, right now, the Mel Kiper Juniors and the Todd McShays of the world, they're saying that none of these defensive players are worthy of that 4th pick. Personally, I wouldn't necessarily agree to say that none of these defensive players are worthy of that top spot because we've seen guys like Grady Jarrett. We've seen guys like Aaron Donald who has dropped in the draft, and then they turn out to be all-world players. So if, our scouts think that one of these guys at that 4th pick is worthy, like if they think Andre Cisco or they think even a guy like Gregory Rousseau is worthy of that 4th pick, personally, I wouldn't do it because I think that somebody is willing to trade up and possibly take a quarterback or even take a guy like Jamar Chase or a guy like Kyle Pitts. If someone else wants to jump up and give us multiple 2nd-round picks, multiple 3rd-round picks, or future 1st-round picks, I'm down with that. If we can, trade back, get a later 1st-round pick, and then possibly get multiple 2nd-round picks or 3rd-round picks, I'm down with doing that. You always could go in and, draft a guy in the trenches. You always can go and, take you a defensive tackle, a defensive end later in the 1st round, and even the corners. I don't think a lot of these cornerbacks are coming off the board super early because there's so many good corners in this draft. Like, I like Asante Samuel Jr., J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain II, Caleb Farley. It's like I've seen at least 7 or 8 cornerbacks in this upcoming draft that I think will be solid guys. Even like a guy like Stokes out of Georgia. I believe his name is Eric Stokes. He ran like a 4.3 40 at his pro day as well. He's a guy even to a lesser degree that could possibly be around in the 2nd or 3rd round that you possibly could take, who has all of the God-given abilities. But I think trading down would be the best, that would be the best proposition for the Falcons right now. I don't think that any of these guys are worthy. Far as on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think any of these guys at 4, you kind of would be reaching Because personally, last year I thought the Falcons reached for a guy like AJ Terrell. I thought we should have went with one of the edge guys, but it turned out that, being that there was a run on cornerbacks, meaning the top cornerback Jeff Okuda went in like the top, I believe he went like the top 5 last year to the Detroit Lions. I believe that Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn didn't think that AJ Terrell was going to last if we decided to go with an edge guy with that first pick, and that's the reason why they went ahead and drafted a guy like AJ Terrell, being that we needed another defensive back, a number 1 defensive back, because we had let go of Desmond Trufant. So we kind of had to fill that need. And that's the same thing I think this year, being that we let go of both of our starting safeties. I really don't feel like the Falcons have a choice. I do think that we have to at least bring in one safety in this draft. It doesn't have to be the top pick, but I definitely think that we have to bring in somebody to man that safety position, because Jalen Hawkins has no tape out there in the NFL, really. He only played, I think, a little bit last season. He mainly was a special teams guy. So I don't think we really have the capability of trying to take a safety. Or I don't think we have the ability to pass on taking a safety in this draft. Like, I think we have to take a safety at some point in the draft due to we not having any depth at that position. We've already seen us bring in depth pretty much at all of the other positions. The cornerback position, we've seen them add in depth. We've seen us add in depth at the tight end position with them bringing in Lee Smith. And we already have Hayden Hurst. We could possibly draft another guy later on, or if they decide to go with a guy like Kyle Pitts at that 4th pick, we'll have 3 different tight ends there. I really think that the picks that we need to add depth are the defensive line and the running back position. I think those are the biggest needs for the Falcons: the safety position, the running back position, and the defensive line at edge rusher and at the tackle position. Let's see here. And he said, get a generational player or trade down. And I completely agree. Like, we have to get, if you're not going with a guy like Kyle Pitts, or if you're not going with a guy like Penei Sewell, you have to trade down. Like, I don't think we really have a choice. You have to trade down at this point. I don't think that any of these edge rushers necessarily you will want to jump up and take at 4. I think they'll still be around if we trade back and maybe move down to like in the teens, maybe 15, or even in the early 20s. I don't think that Greg Rousseau is somebody that'll be off the board. I think that him and Jalen Phillips could be around in the later first round, even could drop into the second round, depending on what teams, if there's a run on quarterbacks, or if there's a run on defensive backs or safeties, you could possibly see those guys even falling into the second round, because Greg Rousseau is a guy that's still raw. Jalen Phillips has questions as far as the concussions, and we could see a lot of players drop. Like I was talking about Caleb Farley, I would be willing to take a chance on Caleb Farley if he decides to, if he drops maybe down into the second or third round, or like even in like the early second round. Then I could see the Falcons possibly taking a chance on his injury history and possibly going with a Caleb Farley, because at that point you would be getting your, the bang for your buck, being that he dropped, when he was highly touted coming out, because a lot of people think that Caleb Farley could possibly be, a top 3 corner coming out. Let's see here. Ghost Peppers, if you're going to target one safety in the draft, Andre Cisco should be the guy. I completely agree. Me, Matt, Mike, we've been on the Andre Cisco train, K-Styles at Atlanta Falcons Nation. We've really been on that train of bringing in a guy like Andre Cisco, a playmaker. Whoever we bring in at that safety spot, I want a playmaker, a guy that was a playmaker in college, a guy that can cover, a guy that can tackle, a guy that can do it all. And the 3 guys that I think can do it at a high level from what I've seen, if you're going to take a safety like in the first round, or maybe in even the high second round, would be not Caleb Farley, but Andre Cisco out of Syracuse. He's my top safety. Trevon Merrick out of TCU. I think he's a guy that can do it at a high level. And then a guy like Richie Grant. Those are the guys that I would go with out of UCF. I think that Richie Grant is a guy that can do it at a high level. He could a guy that can come in and be a day 1 starter from day 1 as a rookie. I think those are the 3 guys that we should look at at possibly taking. But we're gonna start winding this thing down. We're getting close to an hour and 30 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time. I do want to give you guys your Sunday back. But if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat really quick. We got about, I'll be on here for about another 5 minutes. So I definitely, if you guys have any other questions, drop it here in the chat. But I really appreciate you guys continuing to tuning in to my first official live stream. I'm definitely want to do this a lot more with you guys and bring different topics. But I really appreciate each and every one of you guys who dropped the super chats. We really appreciate that. But if you don't have any other questions, that's pretty much all that I had for you guys. I do think, like I said, the Falcons should go with need. If we're taking, a guy in the draft and you're trying to compare, you go with talent or do you go with need? I really feel like the Falcons need to go with need. And it doesn't mean that we can't take a Kyle Pitts, like I said before, with that first pick at 4. You could take a guy still like Kyle Pitts and still be successful. But if you take a guy like Kyle Pitts in the first round with that 4 pick at 4, then you're gonna have to take defense. I'll say with the remaining second round pick, you're gonna have to go defense. I would say the third round, you might have to go defense. And then maybe the 4th or 5th round is where you can start looking at running backs if you take Kyle Pitts that early. And that could be one of the detriments if we decide to take a guy like Kyle Pitts at number 4. If you go with Kyle Pitts at 4, then you're kind of setting your draft up where that means everything from the second round to like the 4th round, you're really going to need to look at defense because the biggest weakness on this team is the defensive side of the ball. But I do appreciate, like I said, you guys. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I do appreciate all of you guys tuning in. I definitely, like I said, will have a lot more content coming for you guys. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Help your boy get to, now I'm on my road to 2,000. So help your boy get to the quest. I'm on the quest of 2,000. So definitely help your boy get to 2,000. Definitely continue to tune in. I'm definitely going to have a lot more coming for you guys. Definitely stay tuned in to Atlanta Falcons Nation. If you haven't hit that subscribe button there, definitely go like, share, and subscribe our videos there. We're on my road for 1K there as well. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew, 1/3 of the heavy hitters coming at you guys. And as I always say, it's always Falcons Nation, rise up. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. As always, Falcons Nation, peace.